The heart I was holding was the size of my fist, which is not, when you think about it, particularly impressive. A lot of powerful things come in unremarkable packages. I was 3 hours into a valve replacement when my scrub nurse, Delia, quietly set my phone on the instrument tray beside me. Not a call, a text. She had learned, over 2 years of working together, to distinguish between the messages I needed to see mid-surgery and the ones that could wait until I had both hands free. This one, apparently, could not wait. I didn't look immediately. I finished the suture I was placing with the unhurried precision my hands could achieve on autopilot, transferred the needle, and then looked down at the screen. It was from Marcus. It said, "Dad wants to celebrate. He figured out what you actually do. He's calling it a gift from God. He's already talking about the cardiac wing contract, Anna. I think this is a good thing." I stood very still in the cold of the operating room. The monitors beeped their steady rhythms. The patient's heart, temporarily at rest in the field in front of me, waited patiently for whatever I decided next. I thought about the previous 3 weeks. I thought about Victor Brash calling me sweet in a simple sort of way. I thought about him asking Marcus, within my earshot, whether he'd really thought this through. I thought about Lindy on the phone at midnight, her voice a controlled detonation. "Anna, I swear to actual God, if you don't let me go over there..." I thought about a duck named Prosciutto, who would, in approximately 48 hours, sit on my foot during the worst dinner party in recorded history and help me see everything with a clarity I hadn't managed in weeks. I thought, the worst thing Victor Brash did was not trying to get rid of me. I could understand that, in a terrible way. The worst thing was that for 3 weeks, it almost worked. Not because of him, because of Marcus. Because of me. I set the phone face down on the tray. I asked for a different suture. I did my job, which I am very good at, and I thought about what had to happen next. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started, which was a Saturday in March, a hardware store, and a man who did not know one end of a grout float from the other. I became a cardiac surgeon because the heart is, I have always thought, the most honest organ in the body. It doesn't lie. It doesn't perform. It either beats or it doesn't. And when something is wrong with it, the body cannot pretend otherwise for very long. I find this comforting in a way that would probably sound strange to people outside medicine. The heart is the one thing in a person's chest you cannot fake. I was 33 years old when I became chief of cardiac surgery at Meridian Medical Center, which made me the youngest chief in the hospital's history and the youngest in the state by 4 years. I didn't put this on my dating profile. I had learned, painfully and specifically, why that was a bad idea after 11 months with a colleague named Dr. Preston Hale, whose name I can now say without any particular emotion because I have processed him thoroughly with Becca Stone over approximately 14 pounds of pottery clay and 2 bottles of Côte de Rhône. Preston, when I was 31 and newly appointed, had a habit of introducing me at every party as my girlfriend, the chief surgeon, emphasis always on the possessive, as though my title were something he'd placed there. He asked my professional opinions not because he valued my judgment, but because being adjacent to my opinions made him feel taller. The relationship ended when I realized I couldn't remember the last time he'd asked me something that wasn't, at its core, about him. After Preston, I kept my professional and personal lives in deliberate, separate compartments. Not dishonestly. I have never been ashamed of my work, but privately. People act differently around chief surgeons. Colleagues get competitive. Romantic interests get particular in ways I didn't have the energy to navigate alongside everything else. So when I met Marcus Brash in the grout aisle of Callaway's Hardware on a Saturday in March, frowning at a display of float sponges with the concentrated expression of a man who is absolutely going to buy the wrong thing, I introduced myself as Anna, said I worked at the hospital nearby, and left it at that. He said his name was Marcus, and he was an architect who had, in a moment of hubris, decided to retile his own bathroom. So do you actually know how to do that, or are you hoping for the best? He looked at me. He had gray eyes, the clear kind that look like they have a weather system behind them, the sort of eyes that make you think the person behind them is paying full attention. He said, mostly the second one. I helped him pick the right supplies. He carried my paint cans to my car. We stood in the parking lot for 45 minutes talking about nothing in particular. His renovation disaster, my terrible kitchen timer, the inexplicable popularity of open floor plans. And I drove home thinking, I hadn't done that, just talked without performance, without calculation, in longer than I wanted to admit. He called that evening. We talked for 2 hours about things that didn't matter, which is how you learn whether you like someone. He called the next evening, too. On our fourth date at a Thai restaurant with plastic menus and genuinely excellent larb guy, he reached across the table and said, "You know what I like about you? You're exactly who you seem to be. No performance, no bullshit, just you." I smiled and said that was very kind. I did not mention that I had been, technically, performing a version of myself that omitted a significant professional detail. But at that point, I told myself it wasn't important. I worked in medicine. I was in nursing, broadly construed. I had done nursing rotations. I worked alongside nurses every hour of my professional life. I had enormous respect for everything nurses did. He didn't ask follow-up questions. I didn't volunteer specifics. The first 3 months were uncomplicated and genuinely good. Marcus was not perfect. No one of 36 is. But he was good in the ways that matter. Honest without cruelty, funny in the self-deprecating way that comes from actual confidence rather than performance. Capable of the kind of deep, focused attention that makes a person feel fully visible rather than observed. He worked on mid-sized commercial projects, the kinds of buildings that don't appear in architecture magazines, but make neighborhoods function. Libraries, community centers, a pediatric outpatient clinic I happened to know from the referral side and thought was genuinely well-designed. When he talked about his work, his face did something quiet and specific, a sort of brightening from inside, and I recognized it because my face does the same thing. We were both people who had found the thing they were supposed to do and were doing it, and that particular shared quality is, I've come to believe, one of the foundations you can actually build something on. I learned about his family gradually, in the way you learn everything real about a person, in pieces, through ordinary conversation, without a presentation. His mother, Diane, was warm, anxious in the productive way, had strong opinions about perennials, and quiet opinions about most other things. His father, Victor, had built a construction company from a single crew to a substantial regional business over 30 years, and Marcus talked about this with the respect of a son who admired the achievement and the wariness of someone who understood the cost of it. "He has a particular way of showing love," Marcus said once. "It comes out sideways sometimes." I filed this away. He proposed on a Sunday morning in my apartment kitchen, both of us in terrible pajamas, him turning away from the coffee maker and saying, "I want to do all of it with you." The whole thing. I want to marry you, if you want to." I said yes into his shoulder, and we stood there in the kitchen for a long time, my tea going cold on the counter. The mug I'd been drinking from, a lumpy, earnest, genuinely terrible ceramic mug with a thumbprint pressed into the clay where I'd gripped it before it set, was one I'd made at pottery class 2 months into dating. I'd given it to Marcus and said, with a small laugh that covered the sincerity, "I made this. It's not good, but it's the real thing." He had put it on his desk, and it had stayed there. The morning after the proposal, I went to the Thursday pottery class and told Lindy, Becca, and Tara. The Thursday pottery class at Meridian Community Arts met in a converted studio space on the building's second floor, a room that smelled permanently of clay and kiln heat and the industrial warmth of a place where things were actively being made. We had our regular spots at the long work table, Lindy by the window, Becca opposite me, Tara at the end with her coffee, and we had reached the point in our second year together where the beginner disasters were behind us, and we were well into what the instructor called finding your practice, which mostly meant that our disasters had become more specific and intentional. Lindy Park lives in the apartment directly next to mine in the Riverside complex on Mallory Street, which means she has witnessed, through walls and shared landings, most of my actual life. She sells residential real estate in the greater Meridian metro area with tactical precision and the interpersonal warmth of someone who genuinely, consistently likes people, which she has managed to maintain as a personality trait despite working in an industry that makes other people deeply cynical. She's 33, Korean American, keeps a bob cut so sharp it looks architectural, and uses profanity the way other people use conjunctions, not aggressively, but as structural elements, load-bearing parts of her sentences. Becca Stone works in the Meridian ER as a senior nurse and has, by her own accounting, seen everything. She manages this by finding most of it funny from the right angle, which is either a coping mechanism or a genuine worldview. She's never clarified, and I've never asked. She has been at Thursday Pottery for 2 years and makes beautiful things, clean, functional shapes with a consistency that looks like it came from a real studio, achieved through being focused and quietly competitive in contexts that should not have competitive elements. Tara Walsh is an accountant who lives 15 minutes east in a very clean house with a very organized home office. She joined pottery 18 months ago because she needed, she said, a hobby with no right answers. She has since found that pottery does in fact have right answers, which she appears to find reassuring rather than disappointing. Her pieces have a precise geometry to them, bowls with perfectly even walls, cylinders that are actually vertical. When she wants to say something, she waits until the moment is exactly right and then says one sentence that reorients the room. When I told them about the engagement, Lindy shrieked and got clay on my sweater in the hug. Becca opened the wine she kept in her tote bag in case of celebration or catastrophe. Tara said, "I looked up his firm's financial structure when you started dating. He's solvent," and then smiled in a way that meant the joke was real and the warmth was also real. What I did not tell them immediately, in October, was the specific contour of what I had presented to Marcus's family. I mentioned in passing that I'd let them assume I was in a nursing role. Lindy's expression moved from confused to understanding to quietly alarmed in about 4 seconds. "You told them you're a nurse." "I told them I work at the hospital in a clinical capacity." "Anna." "It's not a lie." "Anna." "I didn't want—" I stopped and looked at my clay. "I didn't want the Preston thing again. He introduced me as the chief surgeon at every single event we went to. Every one. And everyone would get this particular look, and after the look, everything was about the look. I just wanted to be a person for a while before I was a credential. Lindy was quiet. She turned her piece on the wheel slowly. Then, I understand that, genuinely. But presenting yourself as a nurse to his entire family is a choice with a shelf life, Anna. It's not nothing. I said I knew. I said I'd tell them when the time felt right. I said it probably wouldn't come up anyway. Lindy looked at me with the expression of a woman who has sold residential real estate for 10 years and knows exactly how human beings behave when stakes are involved. She did not say anything else that night, but I noticed that she shaped her piece with somewhat more force than usual, and the vase she'd been working toward became, over the next 20 minutes, something that the instructor later described as aggressively expressive. The Brash family home was in Westfield, 20 minutes from downtown Meridian, in a neighborhood where the houses had names for their rooms and 3-car garages and the particular manicured quality of places where ambition has been successfully converted into property. Victor and Diane had lived there for 18 years. The house had been renovated twice since purchase, once carefully under Diane's direction and once substantially under Victor's, producing a kitchen with commercial-grade appliances and an open floor plan that worked architecturally but felt, standing in it, like a large room had absorbed a medium-sized family. Marcus had described his father as a lot. He said it with affection, but the precision in it came from 36 years of experience. We arrived on a Thursday evening in late October. Diane met us at the door with warmth that was genuinely warm and slightly anxious. Warmth that was working hard, which I recognized. "Marcus, look at you! And Anna! We've heard so much! Come in, it's cold! Come in!" Victor was in the kitchen managing a cast iron pan with the energy of someone performing a more significant task. He was 62, broad-shouldered, with silver hair swept back from a face that had been handsome and was now impressive, which is a different thing. His handshake was calibrated, firm enough to communicate that he could have gone harder, not so hard as to be crude about it. "Anna, we've been looking forward to this." The food was genuinely good. Diane had spent the day on it, a roast with vegetables and bread she'd made that morning. The table was set formally, in the way that meant this mattered. For the first 40 minutes, it was almost comfortable. Diane asking about my commute, Marcus talking about a library renovation his firm had just won, Victor moving between the kitchen and the table with the proprietary efficiency of a man who understood a room as something to be managed. Victor asked about my work at approximately 12 minutes into the meal. He did it pleasantly. He did it in the way of someone asking out of genuine interest. "So, the hospital, what exactly is it you do over there?" "Nursing."
"Clinical work."
"Ah," he nodded. The nod had a specific shape, a settling, like information finding the slot it expected to occupy. "Wonderful. Takes a certain kind of person. Good heart." He said good heart in the way you say it when you mean not intellectually demanding. I noticed. I said thank you. Diane asked which floor with genuine interest, and we had a real conversation about cardiac nursing, the demands of the work, the patient relationships, the particular skill sets involved. And I answered honestly because all of those things were true, and I knew them deeply and had enormous respect for every nurse I worked alongside. The conversation moved on to other things. What I cataloged over the rest of that dinner was the careful cartography of Victor's attention. He was engaged when Marcus talked about his projects. He was interested in construction trends, in the Meridian commercial market, in Brash Construction's recent bids with the insider confidence of someone who doesn't need to perform success because success is simply ambient. When he talked about Marcus, he did so with a proprietary pride that I had seen in the hallway photographs. Marcus at 8, gap-toothed, holding a fish. Marcus at 25, standing at a groundbreaking beside his father. Victor's hand on his son's shoulder, with the quality of something owned and curated. He was kind to me, genuinely kind, in the way you are to something you are already measuring. He asked about my family in a way that functioned as vetting. He asked whether I'd considered moving into hospital administration. Thoughtfully, as if just occurring to him. A man like Marcus needs someone who can grow alongside him. His trajectory is really something. I said that sounded wonderful. Marcus touched my hand twice during dinner in ways that were natural and good. He did not seem to hear the undertow in his father's comments. He had, I was beginning to understand, a trained way of non-hearing where Victor was concerned. Not denial, but a practiced optimism. A belief held over years that his father would eventually stop doing the thing his father consistently did. On the drive home, they loved you. I looked out at the streetlights. Your mom did. A small pause. My dad takes time. He's like that with everyone. I knew. I'd known 40 minutes in. I told myself he was a man who needed to arrive at conclusions on his own schedule. I told myself I'd tell them about my actual position in a few weeks, when we'd all found our footing with each other. I told myself it would be fine. It was not fine. The second family dinner was 3 weeks later. Victor had, in the intervening weeks, apparently done some thinking and arrived at a strategy. He was going to be helpful. This dinner had 2 additional guests. Victor's business partner, Craig, who talked about the Meridian real estate market the way sportscasters discuss previous seasons, exhaustively, with statistics. And Craig's wife, Karen, who had the quality of someone attending an event she hadn't fully agreed to. Victor was helpful with the surgical precision of someone who had done this before. He moved the conversation more than once to the topic of professional ceilings. He said at one point, thoughtfully, as if sharing a useful insight, the clinical staff, nurses especially, they're the heart of the whole operation. But the ceiling, there's only so far that track takes you. It's a structural problem. Marcus said quickly, with a slight edge, Anna's excellent at what she does. Of course she is. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the system doesn't always reward excellence the way it should. He looked at me with something that might have been, on someone else's face, concern. You're right that the system has problems, I said. He seemed mildly surprised by the agreement. He moved on, but I watched the project of it. Patient, continuous, entirely deniable. He was not attacking me. He was defining me, constructing a ceiling and placing me under it, brick by brick, in front of witnesses. After dinner, while Marcus helped clear plates, Victor found me near the family photographs in the hallway. He was holding bourbon. He looked at the photos for a moment, then at me. I'll be straight with you, Anna, because I think you're a smart woman. Marcus has real potential. In 5 years, he'll be running his own practice. The kind of success he's positioned for requires infrastructure, a partnership that can scale with it. I looked at him. I said, I understand. I want to make sure you understand what you'd be stepping into. The travel, the professional expectations. I'm not questioning your ambition. That's kind of you. I'm saying the nursing career, it's wonderful, it's noble, but it doesn't quite... He stopped, found a better word. I care about my son. I looked at the photos, at Marcus at 8 with the gap-toothed grin, at Victor's hand on Marcus's shoulder at 25, that proprietary weight. Victor, I appreciate your honesty. I walked back to the dining room and said nothing more about it. But in the car after, when Marcus said, "He means well," I felt something I had not felt in 3 months, which was the specific loneliness of knowing something your partner doesn't yet know about himself. I told Marcus what had been said in the hallway. "Damn it," Marcus said, with frustration directed inward. "I'll talk to him." "Okay." "I'm not him, Anna. You know that." "I know. I love you exactly as you are." I took his hand. I believed him. I still believe he believed it. But loving someone and being able to stand still while someone slowly dismantles them are not the same skill. And Marcus had not yet been required to demonstrate the second one. The Thursday class that week. I arrived and sat down and put my hands in the clay without starting anything. Lindy looked up from her wheel. "What did he do?" I told them about the hallway conversation. Lindy's piece, which had been heading toward a clean cylinder, developed a compressed quality. Becca, across the table, made a sound between sympathy and something sharper. "He hasn't Googled you yet, has he?" "Why would he Google a nurse?" "Because he's the kind of man who Googles things. He'll type in your name, find nothing interesting, and feel confirmed. Or," she paused, "he'll find the hospital profile, and then we'll have a different conversation." I hadn't thought about the hospital website profile. I keep a low digital footprint by choice. My name appears in the staff directory, in the bylines of 12 published papers under A. Mercer, and in a hospital newsletter from 2 years ago featuring a photograph I've been trying to get the communications department to update for 18 months. In the photo, I'm in scrubs, which could be any role. The caption reads, "Dr. Anna Mercer, Chief of Cardiac Surgery." "The newsletter has been on their website for 2 years, Becca said. Tara had been quiet, which meant she was calculating something. She looked up from her piece, a perfectly cylindrical vase that was actually vertical. "Anna, what's your plan?" "My plan?" "You're engaged to this man. You're going to marry him. At some point, someone will Google you or meet a colleague or drive past the hospital and see your name on a parking sign. What happens then?" I looked at my clay. I hadn't formed it into anything, just a lump, warm from my hands. I was going to tell them, when it felt right. When does it feel right? The problem was that it had been feeling less right with every dinner. Victor's project of gradual diminishment was patient and consistent, and every time I imagined correcting it, sitting across from him and saying, "Actually, I'm the chief surgeon. I have staff of 47. I've published 12 papers." It felt like walking into an argument I shouldn't have had to start. Like the correction would be an accusation. Like I'd be saying, "I knew what you were doing, and I let you do it to see who you were." Which, I thought, was true. I had let it happen to measure him. I don't know when the right moment is, but I'm beginning to think the window is closing. Lindy set down her sponge. Her piece had become something that looked less like a vase and more like a small monument to sustained irritation. She said, with deliberate clarity, "You've created a situation where a man who already doesn't respect you has been given permission to not respect a version of you that's not even fully real. And now you're waiting for the right moment to introduce the actual you? He's going to think I was hiding it to manipulate them." "Were you?" "No." "Then say that." She paused. "Or don't. Watch this man slowly convince Marcus that simple, sweet Anna isn't quite right, Let the venue deposit expire and spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you just sat across from Victor Brash and said, I operate on hearts for a living. What exactly do you do? Silence in the studio. The wheels hummed. He mentioned the venue deposit. I heard Marcus on the phone. He used the word commitment. He meant the money, but he also meant Marcus. Tara, very quietly, picked up her phone and typed something. She set it down without saying what she'd searched. Just a thing, she said. I looked at her. She looked back at her cylinder and added one extremely precise coil. The phone call happened on a Tuesday night. I came home from a 14-hour shift, still in the parking garage, keys in hand, and I heard Marcus's voice through the cracked window of his car. He was parked 2 spaces over, hadn't seen me, and he was on the phone. I should have made noise, jingled my keys, something. I didn't. Dad, I'm not. No. I know. I know the deposit. Yes. She's wonderful. I don't care about the salary thing. I've never cared about that. He stopped. A long pause. His voice dropped further. I'm not saying I agree with you. I'm saying I need time. Another pause. Friday. Fine. I'll call them Friday. The parking garage fluorescents hummed. Somewhere above, traffic on the surface street. Marcus said, the tone of someone ending a conversation that hasn't resolved. I'll handle it. He hung up. He sat in the car for a moment with his hands on the wheel. Then he got out and saw me. His face moved through 4 expressions in about 2 seconds, ending on something that looked like a man standing in the consequences of decisions he'd made and hadn't told anyone about. Anna, he said, how long has he been giving you a deadline? He exhaled. He leaned against the car. About 10 days. And the deposit, there's an actual venue? Yes. And your plan was, I was going to confirm, Friday, not cancel, confirm. I was going to handle it. I looked at him. The garage lights were the color of old butter. Marcus looked tired and genuine, and in the particular way of someone who has been running 2 tracks simultaneously and has just been caught at the junction. Marcus, he told you I wasn't good enough. He implied it in a hallway while you cleared plates. He implied it for 3 weeks, and you have not once told him to stop. I told him I loved you, that you were exactly right for me. But you didn't tell him to stop. He looked at the concrete floor, then at me. He doesn't respond to direct confrontation. It makes him worse. I know how to manage him. I was managing it. I thought about what Lindy had said, about a version of me that wasn't quite real, about a window closing. Marcus, what are you managing, him or me? He didn't answer immediately. In the 3 seconds before he spoke, I felt something shift, not break, not collapse, but change position, the way a bone moves before a fracture. Still intact, already different. Both. I'm trying to protect us both. I said goodnight. I went upstairs. I sat at my kitchen table until almost 2 in the morning, looking at nothing in particular, and the tea I'd made went cold, and the apartment was quiet in the specific way it is when you are deciding something without yet knowing you've decided it. What I did not know in the days that followed was what Victor Brash had done after that second dinner. He had Googled me. He'd typed in Anna Mercer, Nurse Meridian Medical, found nothing of interest, and moved on, until he typed Anna Mercer Meridian, found the hospital newsletter, and found the staff profile page. He found, if he'd gone into the publications section, 12 peer-reviewed papers on cardiac reconstruction technique, the most recent of which had been cited 147 times as of last October. According to Diane, who called me 3 weeks later with a generic apology for how things have been going, Victor spent a full day in his study after this discovery without speaking to anyone except, apparently, his business partner. This was because Brash Construction had, for the previous 8 months, been among 4 contractors submitting bids on the new cardiac services wing expansion at Meridian Medical Center. The project was valued at $2.3 million. The decision process involved hospital administration, the facilities committee, and a formal advisory consultation with the department heads whose units would be housed in the new wing. The chief of cardiac surgery had a formal advisory role in contractor selection for the cardiac wing. Victor called Marcus with enthusiasm. He wanted a dinner, a proper celebration. He had a lot of respect for Anna and felt he'd gotten off on entirely the wrong foot. He was, Marcus reported, transformed. Marcus called me with relief and something very close to happiness. I know this seems fast, but I think he's genuinely come around. I was direct with him finally. I think it worked. What did you tell him? I should have listened to more carefully. I told him how much you meant to me. I was very direct. What exactly did you say? A small pause. I told him what you actually do. Your position. I thought if he understood, you told him. I thought it would help. I was quiet for a moment. I said, "Okay, I'll come to dinner." That same evening, Tara called me. She said, without preamble, "Brash Construction. They have a bid in with Meridian Medical Center. The cardiac wing expansion. $2.3 million. The deadline for contractor selection is end of the month." I was very still. How did you? Municipal contracts are public record. Bid submissions are filed with the city. She paused. I'm an accountant. It's what I do. Another pause, shorter. Anna, I'm not telling you this for any reason except that you should know exactly what you're walking into. I sat with the phone and looked at the wall of my apartment for a long time. I called Lindy. She answered on the first ring. I said, "He wants us for dinner." Oh, that complete son of a... Tara found the bid. Of course she did. A pause. I could hear her recalibrate, the way she does when she's moving from reaction to strategy. Okay, you're going. I think I have to. You absolutely have to, and I'm coming. Lindy. He said bring anyone you'd like. Marcus told me. I called Marcus. Yes, I called him. I was checking the situation, and he mentioned it was an open invitation. I am a friend. I would like to come. I would like to come very much, and I would like to sit across the table from Victor Brash and smile at him while I know what I know. I thought about this. Okay. Good. She paused. I've been lifting weights, and it's showing, and I want him to notice that too. The duck was not on the invitation. The duck was, according to Diane, in a phone call she made to me the morning after, half apologetic and half genuinely entertained, acquired the previous Saturday at the Westfield Farmers Market because Victor had seen something on an interior design account about artisan living elements and become convinced that a live Rouen duck in a decorative wicker basket would create what he described as a warm, unexpected farmhouse modern atmosphere. The duck, Diane explained, was 3 years old and had come with no name. She had named him Prosciutto in a moment of personal resignation. He had been kept, for the duration of pre-dinner preparation, in a large wicker basket near the sideboard, secured, in the theoretical sense of that word, by a lid with a latch that Prosciutto had apparently been studying for several hours. I did not know about Prosciutto when Lindy and I arrived at the Brash house on a Friday evening. I did not know about the duck when Victor met us at the door with an expansiveness that was, compared to his previous manner, seismically altered, as though someone had replaced the original Victor with a warmer, more recent model that was running a different program. He took my hand in both of his, with performed sincerity. "Anna, I owe you a genuine apology. I've not been fair to you. I've been an idiot. I want to do better." "I appreciate that." He noticed Lindy behind me. She extended her hand. She was wearing a blazer that cost more than most people's monthly food budget and had the expression of a woman who is being professionally pleasant. "Lindy Park, Anna's neighbor. I've heard so many things." His pause before responding was about 2/3 of a second too long. "Welcome." Diane, behind him, made brief eye contact with me that communicated several things in rapid succession and then ushered us in. The dinner itself was good, technically. Victor had cooked, had apparently insisted on cooking, which Diane had watched with the expression of a scientist observing a controlled experiment that might or might not explode. There was wine, genuinely good wine, and a first course involving endive that Marcus looked somewhat surprised by. Victor was a transformed guest at his own table. He asked me real questions, not about nursing, not about track and ceiling, but about the hospital, the research, the work. He said my name correctly. He said, with performed admiration, "I had no idea, Anna. When Marcus told me, I want you to know I felt genuinely ashamed." "What exactly did Marcus tell you?" I said. "That you're the chief of cardiac. He said you'd been private about it." He smiled. "Were you private about it, or were you testing us?" His voice was light and warm. He thought this was charming. Marcus, across the table, was looking at his endive. "I was private about it." "Of course, completely understandable. Anyone in your position." He waved a hand generously. "Actually, that leads me to something I've been wanting to discuss." He reached beside his plate and produced a folder. It was navy blue with the Brash Construction logo embossed in the corner. Inside, visible even from across the table, were architectural renderings and what appeared to be a project timeline. The Meridian Medical Expansion, the new cardiac services wing. I understand you have some involvement in the advisory process for that project. I'd love to hear, from someone who actually understands the clinical needs, what the surgical teams would want from the physical space. What would make a real difference to your department? He said this in the tone of a man who thought this was going very well. And then Prosciutto made his entrance. What happened was that the wicker basket had a lip approximately 4 inches too low, and Prosciutto had spent the dinner doing the engineering calculations. He cleared the obstacle at approximately the moment Victor opened the folder. There was a sound from behind the sideboard, a brief, purposeful rustling, and then a Rouen duck walked out from under the sideboard and made his way directly under the dining room table. Victor stopped talking. Diane closed her eyes for approximately 1 second. Very quietly, with absolute resignation. "Prosciutto, honey. No." The duck did not receive this instruction. He walked in a purposeful semicircle under the table, assessed the available feet, and settled himself directly on my left foot with the absolute calm of an animal that has decided this is where it lives now. He was warm and surprisingly heavy. He looked up at me with one orange eye and blinked. I looked at the duck. The duck looked at me. Across the table, I could see Lindy with her lips pressed together in an effort that was, genuinely, one of the most heroic things I have ever witnessed. Victor was on his feet. "Diane." "I'll get him," Marcus said, already ducking under the table. "Don't startle him," Diane said, appearing from the kitchen with an additional basket. What followed was approximately 3.5 minutes during which Victor Brash attempted to retrieve a duck from under his own dining table while maintaining the dignity of a man who had been mid-presentation. He said at one point, attempting authority, "Prosciutto, come!" which the duck ignored with total serenity. Marcus, on his hands and knees, made 2 unsuccessful attempts that resulted in the duck relocating briefly to Lindy's side of the table. She looked down at it, then up at me, and produced a sound that she immediately converted into a cough before returning to my foot. Diane, arriving with a towel and calm purpose, managed to secure Prosciutto and relocated him to a room with a more credible door. Victor returned to his chair. He straightened his jacket. He reached for his wine. Through all of this, I had sat very still because the duck had been on my foot. I looked down at where it had been. I looked up at Victor Brash, who was recalibrating himself back to the presentation, reaching again for the navy folder, composing his face back into the warm, authoritative mask. I thought about the hallway conversation. I thought about the parking garage. I thought about Tara's voice. I'm not telling you this for any reason except that you should know what you're walking into. I thought about Marcus's voice on the phone. I'll handle it. I thought about the thumbprint in the clay of a mug sitting on a desk 2 floors above my apartment. I thought, I have held a human heart in these hands. I know exactly what I'm looking at. Victor, I don't think this is the right conversation to have. He looked at me, his hand stilled on the folder. The bid process for the cardiac wing will go through the proper channels and be decided on the merits. I'll provide my advisory input as required based on the clinical and operational needs of the department, and nothing else. What you're describing tonight isn't a conversation between a contractor and a department head. It's a different conversation, and I'd rather not have that one. The room went very quiet. Not the pleasant quiet of good company. The particular quiet of a room where something has just become clear. Victor said, after a moment, with careful restraint, "Of course, I didn't mean to imply, warmly, directly. I know. I'm just being straightforward." She paused 1 beat. "Thank you for dinner. It was genuinely good." The next 40 minutes were technically a dinner. Wine was finished, a dessert appeared, the conversation covered topics that had nothing to do with anything. But it had the quality. I could feel it even in Diane's particular brand of careful warmth, of a meal that had already concluded before it was supposed to. Marcus and I sat in his car in the Brash driveway for a long time. The house lights were still on behind us. Victor's shape moved in the kitchen window. "You knew about the bid," Marcus said. "Tara found it." "When?" 2 days ago. He nodded. Hands on the wheel, car still off. "Did you know before I called you about the dinner?" "Yes." Another nod. He was very still. "Marcus, when your father called and suddenly wanted to celebrate, when he wanted this dinner, did you know why he'd changed his mind?" A pause. The honest kind. The kind where the person knows the answer and is deciding whether to tell it. He mentioned the hospital expansion. When I asked what had changed, he mentioned it in passing, said it was a happy coincidence. The streetlight put a particular quality on the windshield, slightly doubling our reflections. "And you thought," I said carefully. "I thought he was coming around." Marcus's voice had something in it that was real, genuine self-examination, not performance. "I know how that sounds, I know. But he was treating you differently. He was listening." And I thought, does it matter why he got there? If he got there? "Marcus!" I know that's..." He stopped. He pressed his hand over his face for a moment, then let it drop. I convinced myself it was fine because I wanted it to be fine. And because it was easier. I've been easier about things with my father my entire life. I know that. It matters why. It matters if he accepts me because he needs a contract signed. It matters because this is the rest of my life. And it matters because you knew, and you brought me to that dinner anyway. He turned and looked at me. "I wanted to protect us. You thought his approval was close enough to love, and so you decided not to look at what it was made of. That's the difference between us, Marcus. I've been looking the whole time." I got out of the car. I said goodnight. I walked up to my apartment and sat in the kitchen until past 2, holding a mug of tea that went cold, and the apartment was very quiet, and the quiet was entirely mine. I called my mother. She answered on the first ring because she has always known that her children calling at strange hours is not a wrong number. "I'm here." I told her everything, the whole shape of it, the choice I'd made and why, what it had grown into, where I was sitting now. She listened without interruption, which is a skill she developed specifically for me because I need to finish things before I can hear responses. When I was done, she said, after a small pause, "Anna, do you love him?" "Yes." "Do you trust him?" I sat with that for a long time. "I trust that he loves me. I don't yet know if I trust what he'll do about it." "Those aren't the same thing." "No," I said, "they're not." She said she loved me. I said I loved her. I sat in the kitchen another hour, and at some point I picked up my phone and looked at the next day's schedule. There was a complex case, a pediatric referral. A 7-year-old with a congenital cardiac defect referred to me specifically. Surgical consult at 8 a.m. I thought, there is one thing in my life that is always clear. I went to bed, I slept 5 hours, I was at the hospital by 7. The boy's name was Noah Fenwick, and he was 7 years old, and he had a ventricular septal defect complicated by a pulmonary arterial configuration that had sent 2 cardiologists to their referral pads before landing in mine. He came in with his parents, composed on the outside, barely held on the inside, in the particular way of parents of very sick children who have been holding themselves together for months and are very tired of it. I met with them at 8. I explained what I was seeing and what I intended to do about it in language that was accurate and plain. His father asked precise, researched questions. He had clearly spent the night on medical databases. His mother watched my face more than she listened to my words, which is how I know people are deciding whether to trust me. They watch the face, not the credentials. I answered every question. I told them what I knew, what I didn't know, and what I intended to do about the things I didn't know. I told them I was going to take care of their son. They exhaled, both of them in the same moment. I recognize that exhale. It's the one that means, I'm going to let you carry some of this now. Surgery was at noon. I prepared from 10. By the time we began, the world had reduced itself to exactly the right dimensions. The instruments, the monitors, the field, and the specific and solvable problem in front of me. 8 hours later, I came out of the OR, stripped my gloves, walked down the surgical corridor, and found Marcus Brash sitting on an orange plastic chair outside the suite. He was in street clothes. He looked like a man who had made a decision somewhere else and driven directly here without stopping. He was holding flowers, the kind of flowers you buy when you've decided on a grand gesture and are now uncertain about the logistics, with the slightly awkward grip of someone whose hands know how to hold drafting tools and are improvising with chrysanthemums. He looked at me in my scrubs, hair still in the surgical cap I hadn't removed, the particular flatness in my eyes that comes after 8 hours of close concentration. He looked at me in the hallway light, and something moved in his face. Not just recognition, but the kind of seeing that includes the thing you've been not seeing. Delia told me. From the nurse's station, she said you'd been in surgery all day, a pediatric case. She said the whole floor knew. He paused. She said you'd be out by now. I pulled off the surgical cap. My hair fell loose, which it almost never does at work. I said, "Marcus." I read the papers, he said, with something between wonder and self-reproach. All of them. After last night, I went home and I read everything I could find with your name on it. I watched the conference presentation you gave 2 years ago. Anna, I knew you were chief surgeon, my father told me. But I didn't know you. Not the way I understand it now. And that's my fault. I was tired. I sat down in the chair beside him because my feet had been standing for 8 consecutive hours and deserved acknowledgement. I told you what was true. I work in medicine. I work with patients. I didn't lie to you. You didn't tell me. No. I looked at my hands. Because the last person I was with introduced me as the chief surgeon at every event we went to. Every one. And after that introduction, everyone looked at me differently, and everything that followed was about that look. I wanted to be a person before I was a credential. He called me his girlfriend for 6 months before he asked my official title. Do you understand how rare that is? He looked at the flowers in his hands. He set them on the chair beside him. I told my father who you were. Not at the beginning, but a few weeks ago, when I finally confronted him. I gave him information that was yours to give. I did it because I was looking for a shortcut, and there isn't one. He was quiet for a moment. I am good at managing my father. I've been doing it my whole life. What I wasn't doing was the thing that was actually needed, which was drawing a line and standing on the right side of it. I looked at Marcus Brash in the hospital hallway, tired and genuine and sitting in the particular mess he'd helped create. I thought about the mug on his desk. I thought about my mother's voice. Those aren't the same thing. I need to go see Noah's parents, I said. I know. We'll talk. But Marcus, I need to go to your parents' house and finish this properly. Your father needs to hear some things from me directly. Not because I'm angry. Because I'm not a connection. I'm not a contract. And I won't be anyone's leverage. He needs to hear that clearly. Will you let me come? I looked at him for a moment. Yes, but you're not there to manage it. You're there to let it happen. He nodded. He said, simply with the quality of someone learning something. Okay. I went to find Noah Fenwick's parents and tell them their son was going to be fine. We went to the Brash house on a Sunday. Victor opened the door in casual clothes, which was somehow more disarming than the formal dinners. Less armor, more plainly himself. He saw us on the doorstep and made a quick, accurate assessment of the energy we were bringing. Come in. Diane appeared behind him. She looked at me with the expression of a woman who has spent 3 decades reading incoming fronts. She said very gently, warmly, with quiet acceptance, "Would you like coffee?" We sat in the living room. Diane brought coffee and then withdrew. She had, I understood, been told this was a conversation Victor needed to have and had agreed to let him have it. I would think about this differently later, about the small calibrations, Diane Brash had made over 30 years in ways I hadn't fully seen. Victor sat in the armchair. Marcus and I sat on the couch. Victor looked at his hands for a moment. Then, honestly, I know why you're here. Good, I said. He met my eyes. I behaved badly in how I received you and in why I changed. With the difficulty of a man this doesn't come easily to, the dinner, what I'd planned, was a significant mistake. I confused things. Victor, I'd like to be direct with you. Please. The bid for the cardiac wing goes through the proper process. I'll provide my advisory input as required, based on clinical and operational needs, nothing else. Brash Construction will be evaluated alongside the other bidders, and I'll recuse from any portion of the process where my personal circumstances create a conflict. That's how it works. That's how it's going to work. Not as punishment, because that's what the job requires. Victor said nothing. What I need you to understand, I continued, clearly without anger, is something separate. You spent 6 weeks telling your son, in various ways, that I was not good enough for him, that I didn't have the ceiling he needed, that I was sweet in a simple sort of way. I didn't correct you because I was watching how both of you operated when you thought you knew exactly what I was. I'm telling you now, I held your son in higher regard than you held me. And what I learned in the process is that Marcus needed time to find out where he actually stands, and I needed to give him that time. I reached into my jacket pocket. The ring had been there since Friday. I set it on the table between us. Victor looked at it. His face went through something complicated and true. Marcus, beside me, exhaled sharply. I'm not ending this because of you. I'm setting it down because Marcus and I need to find out what we are without your approval as part of the equation. If we get there, if he gets there, it'll be because he chose it on his own terms. She paused. I respect what you've built. I think you love your son, but I'm not your daughter-in-law. Not yet. And not like this. I looked at Marcus. He was very still, looking at the ring on the table. His jaw was set in a way I recognized, a man in the early stages of becoming someone he should have been throughout. I'll call you. I walked out of the Brash house past the photographs in the hallway. Marcus at 8 with the gap-toothed grin, Marcus at 16, Marcus at 25 at the groundbreaking with his father's hand on his shoulder, and out the front door, and I drove home alone in the cold, and I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of tea, and I felt, for the first time in months, my own outline, clear, specific, entirely mine. What happened after? Tara had, while researching the Brash construction bid, also found 3 publicly available municipal inspection reports citing structural remediation requirements at 2 of Brash's previous commercial projects, issues that had been corrected but had required significant rework on both occasions. She forwarded these, without commentary, to the Facilities Committee chair at Meridian Medical Center, who forwarded them through the appropriate review channels. Brash Construction did not receive the cardiac wing contract. The project went to a contractor from the adjacent county with a clean compliance history and a bid $180,000 lower. When I told this to Lindy several weeks later at the pottery table, she looked at Tara with an expression of profound respect. She said, with deep satisfaction, "Tara Walsh, you absolute weapon." I just read the documents that were already public, Tara said, adding one precise coil to her current piece. The quietest nuclear option, Becca said. Victor Brash called me once, approximately 2 months after the Sunday conversation. He said, with the controlled dignity of a man who has processed something difficult, "I want to apologize. Properly. Not for my son's sake. For mine." He said he'd been thinking about what I'd said. He said he had always evaluated people through what they could do for him or with him, and that this had served him in business and cost him other things. He said Diane had apparently said something similar on multiple previous occasions over multiple years. He said this with a quality that suggested he was only now hearing it. I said I appreciated the call. He asked about Marcus and me, then stopped himself. None of my business. "No," I said, "but I appreciate the call." I meant that too. Marcus and I were not engaged for 4 months. During those 4 months, we talked with an honesty that felt, in retrospect, like something we had been circling from a safe distance for a year. He came to pottery class once, a Thursday in December, which Lindy treated as a formal audition and Becca treated as an opportunity, holding a lump of clay toward him and saying, "Try to center it." He tried. He got about 70% of the way there before it wobbled. Becca watched him correct for it and nodded once to herself and said nothing, which from Becca was a significant endorsement. In November, on a walk along the river path on a gray afternoon, Marcus told me that he had told his father, with specific language, with the directness he had not managed previously, that his relationship with me was not subject to Victor's review. He said Victor had been quiet for a moment and then said, with some difficulty, that he knew and he was working on it, Marcus said, with a clarity I hadn't heard from him before. "I don't know if he'll fully get there, but I'm done waiting for him too before I decide what I want." He asked in the cold air by the river if I'd be willing to try again. I thought about my mother's voice. Do you trust what he'll do about it? I looked at Marcus Brash in the November light, and I thought about 4 months of difficult honesty, about a man learning something about himself at 36, about the specific and unglamorous work of becoming someone who can stand still when it's required. Ask me again at Christmas. He did. 6 months after the Sunday conversation, on a Thursday evening in March, I was at the pottery class when Becca arrived at the studio door carrying a bottle of wine and a white envelope. She set the envelope on my workspace. She poured wine into our studio mugs, the functional ones the art center kept in a cabinet with the logo chipped off half of them. She said, with deliberate casualness, "Noah Fenwick's mother came by the hospital today." I opened the envelope. Inside was a crayon drawing made with the ambitious scale of a 7-year-old who has something to communicate. A figure in a white coat with brown hair that was longer than I usually wore it in surgery. But he had seen me in recovery once when I'd finally let my hair down, and apparently this detail had stuck. Beside the figure, a large red heart, carefully drawn. And in crayon letters, slightly uneven, "My heart is okay because of you." I held the drawing for a moment. Lindy leaned over and looked. She said, warmly, genuinely, "He spelled heart wrong." "He's 7, Becca said. "He spelled it with an A, Lindy said, like he was thinking of a different kind." I looked at the drawing. Something turned over very quietly in my chest. Then I smiled, which was entirely real. I propped the drawing against my wheel stand where I could see it. I reached into my bag and brought out the piece I'd been working on for the past 3 weeks. A mug. This one genuinely good. Round and even, with a weight in the hand that felt right. Functional. I'd pressed my thumb into the clay before it set, as I always do now. Not because I have to, because it's what I make. I put my hands in the clay. Becca poured wine into the good mug she'd just finished and handed it to me without making it a thing. Lindy began a lecture about the spring real estate market that nobody listened to, but everyone found comforting. Tara arrived 11 minutes late, sat down, looked at the drawing, looked at me, and said nothing, which from Tara contained everything. Outside, the March wind was doing something with the trees. The kiln in the back hummed its note. The wheel turned under my hands and the clay moved and held and came into its shape. And I thought about nothing in particular and everything exactly right. The ugly mug, the first one, thumbprint in the clay, the one Marcus had kept on his desk for a year and a half and returned the morning after the Sunday conversation with a note that said only, "Yours," was on my kitchen counter. I had put it there first when I moved, before anything else. A claim, a marker of what was real. The new mug would go beside it when it was done. Better in most ways, imperfect in new ones. Entirely mine. I finished the piece just before 9. Becca packed her kit and hugged me in the way that smells like clay and good wine and the specific warmth of someone who has known you through difficulty and stayed. Lindy walked home with me through the March cold, talking about something that didn't matter, and at the door to her apartment she stopped and looked at me for a moment and said, simply, warmly, "Good." I said, with the ease of someone who has found the shape of a thing, "Yeah." I went inside. I made tea. I stood at the kitchen counter for a few minutes, looking at the ugly mug, the first attempt, the thumbprint, the one that was not good and was entirely real. And I thought, I made this. I held it in my hands and gave it a shape, inexact, mine. That was enough. That was exactly, precisely, entirely enough.